anyone does that.
Here we go. So, good evening, welcome. We are live, unless you're watching us recorded, obviously, in which case we're not. But welcome. My name's Drew. I'm one of the co-founders of Club Soda, and we are absolutely delighted this evening to be joined by Kate and Mandy from Love Sober. Welcome.
Hello.
Hi. So the reason that we're here actually is because you have this extraordinary thing for us to talk about, which is that you have a book.
Get your books out.
Called Love Yourself Sober, and we're going to dive into that in a bit. Just to say, if you are watching live, we're on Facebook, on Club Soda's Facebook page and in our group, and also on YouTube. If you've got comments or questions for Mandy or Kate, we're talking broadly about the issue of being alcohol free and being a mum. I guess being a parent more broadly. If you've got questions, comments, concerns, you've got a problem that needs solving, you've got an opinion that you want to share, pop it in the comments. We will be incorporating them into the conversation as we go along. There'll be time, I hope, for your questions later if you're watching. So do chuck something in the comments if there's something that you want us to talk about. But to kick off, I know who you are, and I know that lots of people know who you are, but I'm aware that some people won't know about you and about Love Sober. So I wonder, Mandy, could you tell us a bit about you and what brings you to this point in your life?
Okay, so I'm Mandy. I am originally from the west of England. I grew up in a place called Stroud, then I lived in Brighton and then a bit in London, and now I've been in France for the last 14 years. I am a coach, sobriety coach and wellbeing coach, a recovery coach, so I work in different elements of the kind of addictive scale, I suppose. With Love Sober, Kate and I are very much concentrated on kind of those that are questioning their drinking, those that would sit in the grey area. So, perhaps binge drinking, waking up at 4 a.m, wondering why this has happened again, making rules around their drinking and then not keeping to them and it making them feel bad and kind of sort of impacting on their mental health. Obviously, we have the podcast, Love Sober, and we have a community of our own, which is a women's only community. My own journey into sobriety, I have been on the journey, as it were, for 7 years. So I first wanted to quit drinking back in 2013. I was very stressed. I had a career job in a university. I had 2 small kids. I had quite a lot of sort of validated or recognized or diagnosed trauma that I'd been living with for many, many years. And I think the culmination of having kids and all of a sudden being responsible for others really kind of brought that trauma to the forefront, and also the stress and the kind of trying to manage all the different roles. I had a real I was a ladette in the 90s, very much a raver and kind of in the sort of festival scene, and had this real sort of ladette faux feminist idea that I should be able to do everything as men do, including drinking. And then it kind of culminated with me being in burnout from work and having very poor mental health. I wasn't sleeping. I was drinking a lot to kind of manage that, and also my husband was working away. I was living in another country. I didn't have any support. It's a kind of perfect storm, and that's definitely where Kate and I sort of the book came from, is that perfect storm of motherhood. Ended up sort of probably drinking about I'd say a bottle of wine a night, sometimes blacking out. Certainly, because I was in a university, I'd be like, yeah, I'm out with the students, and it was kind of that liberation of self to be like back from just that kind of relentless early motherhood years of not feeling like myself, like my identity was completely lost. And so I quit. I found Soberistas online, and that was one of the first forums. And I kind of like, 4 o'clock in the morning, do I have a problem with drinking?
Yeah.
Am I an alcoholic? My best friend's mum was an alcoholic, so I grew up knowing that, and I didn't see that in myself. Like, I wasn't that bad, but I still wasn't happy. And I quit for a year. My mental health got better. Everything got better. I quit my stressful job. It was like, we're moving to the seaside. We upped and left. And then about after not drinking for a year, I was like, woohoo, I'll moderate and have a glass of wine every now and again because I'm better. And then I had about 2.5 years of going backwards and forwards, like, should I, shouldn't I? But I want to be a chic French woman and have a glass of wine, but I'm an English binge drinker, so I don't just have a glass of wine. My mental health slided down again, and I had another breakdown. And then finally I sort of quit. I read Annie Grace's book in 2017, and I was just like, I'm done. Like, this is about me, and this is about my mental health. And so I've been sober for over 3 years now.
Congrats.
Yeah, thank you.
Congrats. And how about you, Kate? What brings you to this point in your life?
Well, I think Mandy and I definitely have that motherhood sort of transition to motherhood from our sort of former incarnations as a catalyst for our drinking to sort of become more problematic. So I think, again, that's why, we just knew we had to write a book, and we need to, we sat down and we asked the question, is it, for all women, which I guess it can be, there are relevances there, but we just felt very much that it was for mums, to answer that particular sort of state of being, but also other sort of parents and carers. So in a way, it's sort of something in the caring role, when you get depleted and when you just feel so ragged and do something that isn't particularly valued or supported, so and then those expectations. So I think that definitely kind of ramped me up to that point where I was like, okay, something has to give here, like something's got to change. But sort of taking it back a few years, I guess I'm a little bit older than Mandy, so I was 80s kid, and I don't know how old you are, Drew, but I don't know if you ever remember that Keeping Up Appearances with Hyacinth Bouquet.
Oh yeah
right. So and I was just like, that's how it was, it was like there's something about my upbringing which was, my mum split up with my dad in the 70s, and he was, like Mandy said, she had sort of figures in her life that presented as that typical kind of alcoholic, and my father did, and then she got married again, and it was suddenly like we had to pretend everything was perfect. And I can just remember really struggling as an adolescent with, just with life, with hormones. I think I had a bit of undiagnosed neurodiversity, like I'm HSP, I've got sensory processing, very sensitive. So life was quite overwhelming to me, I'd say, and we weren't having a great time at home. So, but everyone, it was like, and that sort of pattern carried on really. I sort of went to university, and then I moved to London, and I was working as a journalist, and it was like everything looked fine on the surface, and this sort of carried through, that narrative like really carried through with me. It's like no one would know, no one could tell. Okay, I was binge drinking at the weekend, I was going out for cocktails after work, but so is everyone. And then it was like, maybe we could adjust it a bit in my 30s. But it was like, well, we hung out with musicians. My husband is a musician and a designer. We were like, doing a lot of that. And I sort of had these tools in place. Like I was kind of almost like I was Jekyll and Hyde. I was really into yoga and nutrition and food, and I was quite spiritual. And then it would be like the switch would flick, and suddenly I'd be drinking shitloads of wine and like nicking fags off everyone. Do you know what I mean? Because clearly I never bought my own cigarettes, because clearly I didn't smoke. until I drank, and then suddenly I would smoke enough to kill an elephant. In fact, that was at somebody's speech at my wedding. Referred to me about that. Oh no, it's lovely, isn't it? I felt
so it's lovely, the kind things that people say.
I know. So yeah, and I think it carried on, and there was that sort of motherhood experience. Like, we moved away from Brighton, where I was living, to a small town to get more space, and suddenly I had that familiar thing now from looking on sober forums and meeting other mums, and Mandy had a similar thing of suddenly I'm isolated. Suddenly my husband's working away all the time. Suddenly I'm not meeting people at work, and I'm not feeling like validated. I'm feeling quite invisible. My kids, obviously, I love my children, but I'm stuck in. I haven't got adequate childcare, and I'm lonely, and I'm suddenly having a party of fun with the patio and a bottle of wine, and then phoning my neighbour and going, "You haven't got any fags, have you?" Like, that's doing that. And it was just like, you know what, this is the sort of disconnect that I felt, I guess, earlier on with that kind of Jekyll and Hyde thing, like these bits of me. I think the chasm just kind of grew bigger, and I just couldn't piece it together. So I think my mental health was definitely suffering. I think looking back, I was quite depressed. So and I too found Soberistas 2013. That night, sent up a flare 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm an alcoholic. The first website, it didn't scare the living daylights out of me. And like Mandy, I stopped for a year. And then I went back to drinking, and I'm quite interested in that process, actually. And I think one of the reasons, we'll probably go on to this while we set up Love Sober, it was like, okay, so we can quit, we can get sober, but how do we stay and how do we love sober? And that was the journey that sort of happened after that.
Absolutely. Kate, sorry, your connection is a little bit bad, so you may want to go and shout at your kids again. We'll come on to talk about dealing with stress and that kind of thing when you're sharing broadband. So apologies for the quality of that connection.
Is it that bad that you can't hear me?
Just breaking up a little bit.
Okay.
And just to say, for anyone who's joined us since we've started, my name's Drew. I'm with Club Soda. I'm joined by Mandy and Kate from Love Sober. We're going to be talking about their book, Love Yourself Sober, a self-care guide for alcohol-free living for busy mothers. And we'd really welcome your comments and questions. If you've got thoughts to share on motherhood, parenthood, drinking, not drinking, got questions, problems, concerns. Mandy and Kate are both excellent, well-respected and intensely practical coaches, willing to answer your questions, so do ask those. So both of you have got considerable skin in the game, it's fair to say, in this business of changing your drinking. And Kate, you touched on this, kind of how it was that Love Sober came into being. Mandy, I wonder, could you tell us a bit about the Love Sober community, the podcast, and what's going on in that world right now?
Yeah, well, when I kind of came back to sobriety the second time, I mean, both Kate and I think there was a piece missing for both of us. For me, it was definitely community, and for Kate, it was the kind of toolkit of self-care and that side of things, which we'll go on to in a moment. But we both we got so far, I guess, on will and a little bit of knowledge and a little bit of that kind of empowerment about it, but it wasn't sustainable. And so when I came back, I was like, right, I need mates. I'm a social person. I need friends. I need to have a community. And because I'd gone backwards and forwards so many times, I even though everyone on Soberistas was lovely, I was just like, I didn't want to be like, I've got blog posts where it's like, hi, it's me again. Sorry, thought I had it sorted kind of thing. And so I started my Instagram, and that's, I built a community through there, a lot of women in the States. And actually I came to a Club Soda event, and that was my first kind of outing as a sober person, and that really, really helped. So with the community and what Love Sober does, I'd been listening to a lot of podcasts in America, and I love that format. I love that I could be anywhere. I love that it was intimate, that I was hearing people's stories, that you didn't feel alone. All of those things really worked for me. But it was I love the Americans. I've got really, really good close connections with the American community, but the British experience is our experience, that binge drinking culture, that kind of ladette, that 90s, the bit of kind of crass humor, not taking it sort of, self-deprivation,
deprecation.
And yeah, so I wanted to kind of include that really. So Kate and I didn't know each other at all. We chatted a little bit online, and I said, would you be willing to do a podcast? And she was like, yeah, she was training to be a coach. So she was in that like, yes, let's do this sort of thing. And so we set it up. And so, it's every week we get guests on. Laura was one of our first guests, actually. We're nearly at 100.
Wow.
Yes, 100 episodes. Yeah. And so what we do, we're both trained coaches, so we work one-to-one with people. And obviously we wrote the book and we have some courses, but what we really what we're really interested is two things really: changing the kind of conversation around what it means to be a problematic drinker, but really kind of focusing on self-care, self-leadership, looking at what's going on in people's lives. What do they really need? Because for a lot of women, it's about self-worth, self-esteem. It's about not feeling good in their selves. It's about shame. It's about growing up, having to look a certain way, having to, constantly feeling not good enough. It's about perfectionism. There's a lot of stuff going on. And when you start to unravel that and sort of start to sort of just forgive yourself and feel better about yourself and work on self-compassion and also just really, as you say, practical stuff like planning, boundaries. Like as mums, we kind of have this, we grow up with this narrative that to be a good mum is to be completely selfless, and like what does that mean? It's like to take yourself out of the situation, so there's a huge thing that's going on where you feel like you cannot say no, or you have to be a certain, and also everything's reactionary, isn't it? We kind of grew up in with parents a certain way, then we went the other way. You get so many messages about what it is if you breastfeed, if you don't breastfeed, everyone's got an opinion on what makes a good parent, and so all of that sort of adds on, and so it's all those questions really about asking better questions about what we need, looking at the support that people need, and community, and when you start getting, when we just finished our group program, and it will be on again November through to January, and we worked with sort of, I think it was about 15 women in that alchemy of women supporting women, and I'm sure it's the same with men, and it can be with mixed groups, but there was something so special of just that kind of like, me too, okay, and it's like, you can do this, supporting each other, and that kind of really beautiful kind of old circle of women's stories, which is really, really powerful, I think. So we try to look at the whole picture and it be sustainable rather than just like, get a month and then go, okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now what?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the thing which I have to say I love about your book is that it's actually that there's lots of it which it actually really isn't much about drinking. It's actually about what it means to live your life well, and in the whole of your life. And I love the fact as well that it is really, really practical. That it's full of exercises and tips and tricks and ideas, and it strikes me, and also obviously your audience, right? Busy mums. That you've written it in brilliantly bite-sized chunks, so if you've got 3 minutes to read before you crash out at 2:30 in the morning, there you go, there's a bit of the book.
And I would just like say, like, we put it for mums, but we do recognize that modern day families can include anyone, and and it's primary caregivers, so if that's a same-sex couple, or if that's, you know, someone looking after an elderly parent, whatever, you still got that stress of being that primary carer and having to, you know, essentially give a lot of your time and a lot of your energy to other people, which can get into this sort of space which we concentrate on in the book, and to resource those people, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got a very simple question somebody's asked is how can they get a signed copy of the book?
I don't know. That's a really good question.
No idea how we'll work that out. Another question though, and I think this is so let's kind of move on to some kind of practical stuff. So one of the things that you know, has put as you say, primary caregivers, mums, dads, others, under huge amounts of, you know, unprecedented amounts of pressure this year has been lockdown. The challenges of juggling work, of homeschooling, of worry about elderly parents, of, you know, there's been so much going on. Somebody's saying, are we on the verge of a huge drinking problem as a country, considering that most people's pastime lockdown is gin? So I wonder if you had any kind of reflections from your own experience of living through this year, what it's been like to go through lockdown, alcohol-free, sober. What can you imagine what it would have been like if you were drinking, and kind of what's that been about for you?
Yeah, I mean, can you hear me okay now that I've completely...
We can. You've relocated. You're in a different bit of your house. It's very exciting.
Like, it was very authentic because there were children shouting. I don't know if you could hear that. And my husband cooking, and I've come into the kitchen. So I'm not, and now they've all gone.
Stuff happened.
That's a bit like the lockdown. Do you remember when we first went into lockdown and no one could find any space in the house?
Yeah.
And like everyone, like how many people moved their office into the bedroom, and it was really weird. It was like on an animal behavioral, territorial level, it was incredibly stressful, I think. So, you know, I suppose, I mean, I'm making a joke about that, but I think all of these stresses, everything was stressed. I mean, everything was pressurized for people. I mean, you know, it still is, because there's a lot of uncertainty, right? But I can only think that you know, that I really thank God that I was sober through it, because without that kind of clear boundary of like, you know, I don't do that, I know that I definitely saw people kind of at the beginning of lockdown, almost it was like, oh right, okay, you know, the kind of things on Facebook or social media saying you know, oh well, that's fine, we can start drinking at 12 o'clock, and then you find oh, actually it's not feeling so great. And then by the end, I think it was Alcohol Change published a report that I think it was in Scotland, it had risen by 200% calls to this alcohol charity. And you know, what we saw then was really people, you know, this use that was not this kind of okay social out in the pub kind of stuff, but was definitely drinking to cope with stress, anxiety, mental health reasons, self-medicating, and then obviously that makes you incredibly vulnerable at that point of sliding down the kind of alcohol use disorder kind of spectrum. So it's a desperately difficult time for people, you know.
I think it's I mean, that's one of the ways that because a lot of people sort of will ask, like, am I that bad enough? You know, we want that kind of permission to stop. People are looking for permission to stop. So it's like, I'm not that person. So am I bad enough that I have to stop completely? And something that really resonated with me when on my journey back and forth was, you know, if someone that I absolutely loved, you know, someone really close to me died, if there was a traumatic event, I don't know whether I could have brought myself back from my drinking. So that was like a big, like, okay, I'm managing it because my life is pretty good, but what if? And that was like, ooh. And the other thing was, you know, as Kate said, when you have boundaries, you know, in your time, you're managing it okay. But for me, every time it was the summer holidays or every time it was Christmas, then that's when my drinking would get really bad, because moderate or I could control my drinking because of the boundaries that were set up by structures. And so, you know, I think if that resonates with you, and that's kind of what's been happening for people at lockdown, it's like they've been moderating, controlling it for a long time, and maybe they sit within that kind of harmful, hazardous alcohol use disorder area, and all of a sudden they've lost those kind of perimeters around it, and those people are, you know, slipping into sort of more serious dependency, which is, you know, really, really worrying. So yeah, and the space issue, you know, and a lot of people, they have strategies. So it's like, right, I go for a run, or I go to yoga, or, you know, I meditate, and then all of a sudden you've had to change those things. And so, I mean, what we've been saying is it's kind of like, how can you just get mini breaks? It's like breaking it really, really small down. So it's like, okay, maybe you can't go out for that hour, but you can still take, you know, 5 minutes to breathe, and just try and like really break it down into the day, so you don't get to that massive sort of surge of overwhelm at the end of the day, which is such a huge trigger.
And then you had to also, don't forget, the homeschooling, which you didn't have so badly in France, but there was so many parents feeling so stressed out about the homeschooling. So hopefully, you know, people have found a little bit of respite now, you know, and obviously the children need to go back to school and be with their friends and their teachers, and that, you know, that whole village to bring up a child kind of thing. You know, we don't know. So I think that that's something to take forward as well. And again, you know, we talk about this in the book, is that kind of, you know, the good enough parenting and the lowering of the expectations, and calling kind of bullshit on this kind of perfectionist sort of parenting, you know, and for women, you know. So I don't know if anyone can take anything from that, you know. I don't think we've got perspective on it either. I don't think we're still a bit in it, we're still making a lot in it. And so, you know, reflection is such an important tool, isn't it? Okay, I've done this, I can reflect what worked, what didn't work. And I don't even think that people are actually able to do that yet. So it's almost like, you know, that emergency self-care, like, so what's going to really cut it? So a bit of exercise, as much as you possibly can, you know,
live in the bath.
Yeah, you know, we focus quite heavily. It's something that I've got really into lately, which is the autonomic nervous system regulation, with all of the sensory sort of stuff.
Kate's favourite book, polyvagal.
My favourite book at the moment, so the polyvagal exercises. So yeah, so that's a lot about, because our brains are going to be running away with the anxiety, obviously going to fight, flight, and then suddenly you're anxious and you're fizzy and your brain's not properly working. So all of those that's something we can do at home, right? We can lie on the floor, but we're not in an office or doing a busy commute maybe, so we can wrap ourselves up in a blanket and we can lie down on the floor, or hug the kids or our pets, and that will actually bring our nervous systems down and help us regulate and help us not kind of fall prey to the wine witch. So maybe it's using your environment, you know, that creating space, taking a space, like Mandy said, just putting in mini breaks, recognizing it's a real thing, recognizing we're in adjustment as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. I mean, I think one of the things that I end up talking to people quite a lot about stress and coping in the context of Club Soda's courses, and I think one of the things that comes as a bit of a surprise to people, you know, I'm aware that there are people who are watching who are maybe still drinking, thinking about changing, wondering about, you know, how to navigate that. But one of the things that can keep people clinging on to drinking is the idea that it relaxes you. But actually we fail to recognize that it causes this surge of stress hormones in our bodies as well. It leaves you with a state of anxiety, and particularly if you're already under stress, it actually ends up making it worse, not better.
And the thing, sorry, Nant. Well, I was going to say one more thing, because again, you know, you said that what we do, you know, is we talk about tools for living, I suppose. And again, I think it's especially pertinent now, is the idea of having hope And, we're quite, interested in the science of happiness and how you can affect that kind of those bits of your mental health. So, the one thing that we sort of encourage, that looking for bright spots, looking to add in, doing a bit of gatekeeping on news and seeking out positive news and seeking out positive connections where you can, because again, all of that will be feeling a bit wobbly at the moment. And those are tools for sobriety. So we always say, those tools for life are tools for COVID, and they are tools for sobriety. It's all the same thing. It's all managing our nervous systems, our autonomic responses, and our mental health, which are managing those triggers. So,
yeah, absolutely. So we had a really practical question about the book, which, by the way, just to plug again, it's called Love Yourself Sober. But a question which is really about, I guess, where it's useful for someone in their journey of change. Is this a book once you've quit and you're kind of working out how to be a better parent, or can this take you through the whole process, or who's it for, this book?
Yeah, I mean, the book is designed to take you from sober curiosity through to sobriety. So my cat's queen cat was like not sure whether she wants to go out or in, but it's set into 4 sections. So the first section is really that pre-contemplation, like, do I have a problem? Is this for me? Shall I try it on? What shall I do? What does a problem look like? What do I identify with that? Looking at that kind of mindset of, is this really boring? No, maybe it's not. What are these positive aspects to it? And then taking you through to kind of practical day-to-day stuff in that first month, looking at the triggers like HALT, hungry, angry, lonely, tired, overwhelm, as we said, and then kind of progressing to further on to like, right, now what do I want? And as Kate said, all that kind of the positive, the sparkly stuff, the gratitude, and also that kind of longer term self-care and self-leadership of going, what, actually I'm going to say no. Actually, I don't want to go. And it is very gradual, and even the things that you say to people, and these are our learned experiences, because for sure at the beginning I was like, I get caught in parties where people would interrogate you, like, why did you stop drinking? Sorry, what? Can you not just have one? Like, what about that? What about one? What about beer? What about cider? And I'd be like, oh my God, no, well, I used to be a real party girl, and then I have really bad insomnia. Well, I've got depression. I have trauma, like, and then just be like, and then feel completely sort of like, awful afterwards, like I'd been bullied or whatever. And so it's that sort of stage appropriate. And it's like, we have a friend, Rose, who's another recovery coach, and she's actually doing the audio book, which is amazing to have a friend who's an actress who's doing our book. And she has a traffic light system, which is really simple, which we put in the book, which is like, red, orange, green people. And it's like, red people are there, no way, they're never going to get it. Just keep it simple. Don't say anything.
The knob, yeah.
And then you've got the green people, who are like your people, who are like, they'll love you, whatever you do, whatever change. And then you've got the kind of orange people, and at the beginning they just go in the red. It's just like, they just don't need to know. And then when you feel more confident and you feel stronger, then you can start sort of explaining yourself or holding it. So the idea with the book is really to sort of take you through that journey and give you all the tools that you need. And as you said, to then dip in and dip out and go, oh, actually, that's like a nice exercise. I wrote a story about Cinderella and alcohol. So you can write a story of creativity about those are things to come back to sort of.
And they've got within it, we've got these things called personal project, which are these little exercises you can do. So that, it comes from the coaching techniques, and it comes from our lived experience, and it comes from, okay, what do we need right now? That fundamental question, really. So, that we as carers kind of need to ask ourselves. But it was really funny, because we were like, even down to that, we were like, what do we call those things? And we were like, we can't call them tasks, because carers have enough bloody tasks.
Enough to do.
Want another task. So we've got personal projects, which are optional, which may suit you and serve you in your exploration and your cultivation of your well-being, which is the heart of the book, I guess, is that we love ourselves sober. We do it by self-care, and we carry on that self-care so that we can carry on loving ourselves, because so much of this narrative where we get to when we've got a problematic relationship with alcohol is the opposite of that. We're disconnecting from what we actually need, our authentic needs, and we're really beating up on ourselves. And we are often, I used to, now I look at it like, okay, I've raced through the end of the day, and I feel like society's trying to fob me off with that glass of wine. It's trying to tell me to shut up, rather than say, actually, what do I need?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
yeah, there's been a little discussion while we've been talking about TV shows, and I know exactly the TV show that they're talking about. Winds me up as well. Saturday Kitchen. Have a glass of wine with a dinner at 10:30 in the morning. Super weird. Once you kind of realise that's super weird, but actually, I do. I guess one of the kind of broader questions which I'm really interested in is kind of the social pressure that mums can feel around drinking. And when you think about like mummy's wine time and wine o'clock and all of those birthday cards with Prosecco bottles on and pink gin, our consumer culture seems awash with alcohol, and it seems particularly targeted at women, and even more so at mums. And I wonder if you've got any reflections on what it's like to live in that culture and be alcohol free, and what you see now that maybe you didn't notice before.
Yeah, well, I'll start, because obviously I live in France, so it's very interesting for me to have that kind of comparison of different marketing in a different country, and when you're in it and you're immersed in it, you really don't see it, how sort of intense it is and how everywhere it is. And it was actually my daughter, the first time we came back, and it was when I was still drinking, and we went to a birthday party for a friend of mine's child in a pub, and she was like, "It's strange, mummy, to go to a kid's birthday party in a bar." And I was like, yeah, like I just never even considered it, and everyone was drinking, around the kids. And no shame, no blame, like it's cultural. Pubs are a massive part of British culture, but what happened in that kind of convivial kind of way of bonding, which is beneficial for us to be with other people, all of a sudden women and mums are very isolated because they're at home and they're looking after the kids. And then there was social media, and all of a sudden we could connect. And at the beginning of kind of Instagram and Facebook, social media was awash with perfect parenting. Like everything looked like it was out of a Bowden magazine. Kate always says it's like a Bowden and Kath Kitchen bun fight. It was just like these ridiculous expectations. And so all of a sudden there was a backlash to that, and it was like, this is really hard. And there was this honest parenting movement, and on Instagram mums were saying, what, here I am, this is the reality, there's all my washing, my kids are having fish fingers for the 15th time, I'm trying to run a business, like this is it, but it's all right, it doesn't matter. And that was such a relief to mums. It was just like, oh my god, we're not alone, like everyone's struggling like this, but part of that was having a gin and tonic or having a glass of wine. And what people weren't seeing was obviously what happened afterwards was like, some of those influencers or some of those us would have one glass, yeah, cheers mates, and then go to bed. And then there was others of us were like finishing the bottle. And then, big companies got involved. We're like, oh, there's a market here we haven't tapped into, like they did with women in the 90s by sort of, glamorizing wine and, the whole European idea. And it was like, right, we're mums, okay, mummy wine time. And it became this thing. But what's so really upsetting about it is about problematic drinking. It's about drinking a lot. Like when you look at those things, it's like the kids are there and you're over it, like, but you've got your wine, it's your treat, or you've got like wine glasses with you know, a normal glass and then mummy's glass, and it's,
Mm-hmm.
you know, double the amount. And then you kind of start to unravel it, and it's like, well, 1 in 4 mums have mental health issues, you know, early motherhood. You've got postnatal depression. You've got the body changes, the hormonal changes that are happening to a woman, which are really impactful. You know, you've got the stress, you've got the change in identity. There's so much. It's an extremely vulnerable time for a woman and their mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you're like, hang on, this is actually really wrong and really upsetting. But again, it was a way of bonding. So it came out of a good place. It was just like, let's do something. Yeah, okay, let's be together, because this is hard and we don't have support.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, you know, alcohol's an addictive drug, and it can be devastating. And so yeah, it's time to really change that, and really
Mm-hmm.
sort of just, you know, and the thing with social media marketing as well is it's there is no kind of what's the word, regulations in the same way as you would in, can you tell I used to work in a business school and teach marketing? Okay, I'll stop now. But yeah, I mean, that's one of my main
Mm-hmm.
bugbears, I suppose.
I guess one of the reasons to bring it up is that one of the things which I sometimes wonder if it holds people back from change that they know is going to work for them.
I do. I think. Sorry, I'm going to put my 2 pence in there before we move on, because I think I was going to say, before I stopped drinking, I think what's dangerous about it is that when you start questioning your drinking, so you go through that pre-contemplation stage where you're like, okay, this isn't feeling quite right. And what you then do, it's entirely natural. You look outside of yourself to your peer group and your wider culture to do confirmation bias, and you want to basically say, what's everyone else doing, you know? And then you receive your information like that. We just do that. We are herd animals. And so if what's being mirrored back to you is this sort of normalization of it, then I think I was genuinely confused for quite a number of years, because I was like, this doesn't feel right, but I'm supposed to be doing this, but I'm only supposed to be doing it like that. But hang on, I can't do it like that. But I'm not like them over there, because they look like that, and they're the ones with the A on them. And then those are the ones with the N for normal on them. I'm not anyway, you know. So it was genuinely confusing. Which is one of the great things now with the rise of the kind of internet and forums, so we can actually kind of find our people. And I think after that, I mean, I think one of the brilliant things is once you see it, you can't unsee it, and you can use it as fuel in your sober engine to get really angry, because for too long people have said, oh, it's just your problem, it's a problem of the individual, and all that onus goes back onto you, and then all that shame goes back onto you, and it's like, no, we're calling bullshit and we're getting active. So actually you can use it as a bit of a, come on then, let's move on. You know?
And I think there's also that thing of like, the school gates are super intimidating. You know, you kind of go to school and all of a sudden you're supposed to be friends with all these people that you probably wouldn't like be friends with normally. And so it is that kind of social lubrication. And what we found actually was when you sort of, you know, some of those friendships don't survive, or they, you know, they change, and it's like, well, actually, what substance was there to them anyway? It was like we were just forced upon us into this kind of thing. And the beautiful thing when you get sober is you do kind of find your real, true sort of soulmates in friendships, because it is nothing to do with drinking or not. And so, I mean, it is challenging, but and the other thing that you see is that the people that don't drink that you never noticed before, you know. And we always say that, you know, it's like one of those detective things. It's like when you first go out and it's really super intimidating and really worrying and stuff, and it's like, well, just be a bit of a detective, because you were just blinded by booze for so long. You just didn't see what was in front of your face, and there might just been the most magical, wonderful person that's been on the periphery of your friendship group, and you've just kind of put them aside because they didn't drink like you or whatever. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, hang on, oh god, that person's actually really interesting, and like we could do other stuff together. And you know,
You know what else I think? I think with that whole the school gates thing and the wine, I think what we do is we get sober and we get our skills on board. I think that then it's fine to have certain people who you have different groups for different reasons. So, you know, some of those mum friends, it's really genuine. We really do need to hang out and have a coffee and talk about kids. And they might not be soulmates, but they might be good people, and they might be good friends and have your back. But then you've got kind of sober people who really get it, and we can be on our forums and we can kind of be making those connections. And I think it's a bit like a traffic light system. I think as we, you know, go through our sobriety and our you know, and it is scientifically proved, our brains work better, we can make some decisions, our confidence increases, we can be more skillful, I suppose, in how we socialize, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. So just a reminder, if you're watching us live, if you've got any comments or questions about parenting, drinking, sobriety, Mandy and Kate are very happy to answer those. So I had another question, which was really a kind of a little bit kind of beyond the scope of your book, but one that I know that people talk to me about, which is particularly if you've got if you've come slow to the party in terms of sorting yourself out with drinking, and your kids have seen you, particularly young kids have seen you and had experience of you drinking, and then coming into their teenage years and worrying about them drinking and all of that complexity about, you know, are they following in my footsteps, even though I might have changed or I might have sorted myself out, you know, do you have any kind of reflections on how to manage that as a parent, and how to deal honestly with teenagers who might be experimenting, and particularly if they're kind of reflecting on behavior of your own that you regret?
Well, I mean,
go on.
So, I mean, mine were young when I stopped. But I think it's now we're getting to that point, and it's very much sort of suck it and see. But I think a really good place to start is always the kind of facts, you know, what it does to you, you know, just the risks, being safe. You're going to experiment, but let's try and be safe, you know, make sure you've got your mates around you and all the rest of it. So that sort of common sense thing. And also, what was I going to say, you know, those talks about peer pressure and just you know, almost like a coachy thing of like, okay, let's walk it through. If you need to leave, you know, what can you say? You know, can you send up a flare? Or, you know, you could practice sort of saying no, you know, I don't want to. Like, I'm saying that, my kids be just like, I'm just not having that conversation with you. You can sod off. So I think there's that's how I will do it. I mean, and I have a particular, you know, my son has experimented and did quite early on. And I think for me, this is going off the topic slightly, but there's a big link between neurodiversity and dabbling and being at risk of, you know, undiagnosed stuff going on. So, you know, that is sort of my tack at the moment. We talk about mental health and we talk about predisposition to kind of like, and we talk about, we've had those conversations about, are you doing it and just mucking about with your friends, or are you doing it to self-medicate? And we've had that young, we had that at 11, we had that chat. So in a way, sort of mine came out of the box a little bit earlier, maybe. Yeah, I don't know what you've got to say, Mand.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, the main thing is that no one's perfect, right? So everyone makes mistakes, and it's one of the best lessons you can teach your kids is that they don't have to be perfect and that they can make mistakes. And so, you know, I'm very, very open with my kids about, obviously, you know, I mean, they're a bit older, they're 14 and 12. I mean, I do think my drinking had an impact on them when they were little, you know, because I had complex PTSD and I was drinking too much, and there was a lot going on, and I was, you know, raging a lot. I was really angry a lot of the time, you know, and so I've had to sort of own that and go through that journey with them of like seeing them flinch or worrying that they might say the wrong thing and things like that, and being able to sit down and go, you know what, like, what's going on there, and them not being worried to express themselves because they might get into trouble or whatever. And the most amazing thing about being sober is being able to have those tools yourself, to be able to go, let's, do you want to get a emotions wheel out? What is it? Does it feel like anger, or is it a little bit like this? And to sit there and give them a hug and say, you know what, like, I'm not going to do, you don't have to worry about that anymore. I'm not going to do that, and build that trust again is incredibly powerful. And everything is an experimentation in life, everything we're doing, even now, like trying to get it to work. So it's just like, well, let's just kind of keep talking about it and keep that narrative going. And I mean, one thing I think I've been learning a lot about recently in terms of the brain and addiction is, that if you start, young, like regularly drinking, 11, 12, 13, 14, in those early years, that is really going to ramp up the developmental difficulties of your brain and the potential for dependence later in life. And so, if try to get your kids as far as you can, as old as you can, to allow their brains to develop. And that was certainly something growing up. I mean, me and my mates were all drinking by the age of 13. It was just like that, it's like nothing to do. Let's go to the graveyard and get pissed on cider, and so, there is a kind of narrative that you should introduce alcohol to your kids, and it be a safe thing to do with them so they can learn. But actually, with my professional head on, you modeling an alcohol-free life and saying that they have a choice and that they don't have to drink is actually much, much better. Even if they're going behind your back and doing it, it's actually better, because they are understanding that it's not something that is normal. And so if you can get them to 21, 22, then like, brilliant, but
not in the UK. What was I going to say? Oh, I know what the last Christmas, it was really lovely because we had lots of alcohol-free stuff, and we made sort of alcohol-free cocktails for the whole family. So I think that's a really nice flip to that, is just to show that it's like Janie Lee Grace always says, doesn't she, keep the ritual, change the ingredient. So I think if you also focus on celebration and the fact that we're all, I mean, they're just going to think we're embarrassing anyway, aren't we? So we might as well be sober, embarrassing people with alcohol-free cocktails as opposed to really, really drunk or something. But I mean, in all seriously, just it's just showing the positives, I suppose. And I think that I don't know, I just think as well, like Mandy was saying, like, say for example, I truly believe, that we do recover, and that talking honestly and saying sorry, it holds such a lot of power. I think a lot of problems happen when people don't own things, they don't talk about it. And also, like Man said, like, we do what we can with what we have. We are all trying our very, very, very best. And just to be able to, say that and just kind of be honest. I think that honesty with your kids and showing them how you feel, and being able to talk it through and to hear them is so powerful. You know?
Absolutely. I was just taking there's some discussion about the book, about a reflection that your book, I think, will help everyone. Your life coaches, so your activities, advice and questions in the book can help everyone in all sorts of situations. I'd even say it'll help people that aren't trying to go sober.
Thank you, Sarah.
People say lovely things. I guess one of the other areas that can feel like a pressure for mums who are on the verge or thinking in that pre-contemplation stage of changing their drinking is your relationship. If you have a partner who co-parent with somebody who drinks, and how you navigate that. And I wonder if you've kind of got any tips or advice for, because that's a complex thing, right? Once you've got relationship difficulties and parenting and everything thrown in the mix, have you got any kind of tips for navigating that if you're embarking on a change for yourself about dealing with those kinds of relationships?
Yeah, it's certainly my own experience was quite a journey. I mean, I'm married to a Frenchman who has a wine cellar in our house, so it's been a very prominent part of our relationship, and it was actually part of our romance. It was like, wow, this French man with his chateau mama, and that was part of the thing, of like very much ritualistic about food and about fine wine and that stuff. And then what happened afterwards, when we finish that and move on to something else. But and I think it can be hard for the partner, the back and forth, and I think you kind of need to respect that for them, because they obviously, you're going to get to a point when your partner has said over and over again, I think I'm going to quit, like I'm not going to do this anymore, that you get a bit tired of hearing it. So I think what I did, I just looked him in the eyes and I was just like, I really need to do this. And I know I've said this before, but this is about me, and I just need to not have any wine in the house for a while, and just really help me with the kids for a bit, and just let me kind of just go online. I've found this forum that seems to be really helping. And he was just like, okay. And I didn't put any restrictions on him. And that's been a kind of work in progress, because you realize after a while, it's like, actually, when you drink that much, it doesn't work. So we've had this back and forth. And to be honest, I respect him, the fact that he's a drinker, and I do expect that respect as a non-drinker, and it can be sticky. And if he's really going to go out on a night out and get wasted or whatever, he doesn't really do that anymore, but he sleeps on the sofa. It's and other than that, I mean, it's been great, and it hasn't changed anything, and we still love each other, and we still have nice meals, and he has his wine and I don't, and that's
I think it's a real fear for people when you are contemplating giving up. It's like, those alcohol messages, if you can't connect without me, which is so big, you use me for connection. And then you actually might have been doing that with your partner. And most of us did, didn't we? Because we're in Brit culture, we went out and we dated and we were down the pub, or, unless by some miracle it didn't factor in your life, that's how I feel about it. So I think it is a really big fear, and I know I was very scared that it would change everything, like it would change our relationship. And I think what happens, what I say to people as you go on, what I found is that I realized that it became less and less and less significant, and you realize, wow, I gave it all of that importance, and that importance was in my head. That was me, because I had a problem with it, and it had become far too significant for me, And I know I just I was on Soberistas, and because my husband had heard me say, I really want to give up moaning every time I had a hangover on a Sunday morning, I didn't tell him straight away. I just got a month under my belt, and I was on Soberistas all the time. And then I was like, actually, I'm really going to have to tell him, because I think he might think I'm having an affair, because I can't literally always on this forum, right? I'm not internet dating. And so I basically just said, look, I'm doing this, and I don't expect you to change. We do that, don't we? We don't expect you to change, but I think he really, because you've got to have compassion for yourself, because it's a hard change is hard, right? And then have compassion for that other person, because they're going to have to adjust, and there's going to be an adjustment period. And the other thing that I would say is keep it separate. Is it Lord of the Rings, where he goes, when Gandalf says to Frodo, he goes, keep it separate, keep it safe. And it was like, that was my sobriety. It's like, no one's having that, no one's getting anywhere near it, it's mine, it's mine, it's mine.
Yeah.
If I knew someone would, I could easily get knocked off with it. So I think that's a really, that would be my tip.
Yeah, it's an absolute nugget, because I think, there'll be those moments where it can be that one conversation. That's what happened with me after a year. It's like I had one conversation with a friend, and we'd always been quite competitive growing up. And she was like, well, I think I can moderate, I just drink on the weekend. And I was like, yeah, me too. And it was like literally just like that, so I do think it's really like, it's yours, it's precious. It's not to do with anyone else, and you just keep it, as Frodo says, whatever he says.
Gandalf's the Grey at that point. Sorry, I'm really nerding out on Lord of the Rings.
We've gone wildly off topic if we're talking about Lord of the Rings. So somebody said we're coming towards the end of this of our time. Thank you so much, by the way, for this conversation. It's been really rich, and I hope it's really helped people as well. Whether you're a parent who is already sober and pursuing an alcohol-free life, whether you are in that moderating phase or in that forever, or whether you're just on the beginning of working out what on earth you're going to do. I think there is so much here. So I love this comment. Somebody said such smart, human, and insightful comments. And I would just like to reflect that. I think you've written a really smart, human, and insightful book. And I hope it gets really widely read. I think it's brilliant, and thank you for writing it and the gift of it to the community. Any kind of final thoughts for you? So if somebody is kind of wondering, if their finger is hovering over the buy now button right now on Amazon, wondering whether they should commit to this, why should somebody buy the book?
Oh gosh,
do you know what I was just going to shout? Do it. And then I realised you were asking for something really sensible. Mandy, go on.
Can you tell we're a team? Because why not? Like, just give it a go. Like, there's nothing to lose, and always enter everything with a curious mind. It won't harm just to explore a little bit further. And soon the audio book will be out, and then you don't even have to read it out in the world. You can just plug it in, and I think audiobooks are the most genius thing for that, and podcasts too, because it can be your own little dog walk, it can be your own little ride to work on. We're not doing that now, our social distancing, very far away from other people, but yeah, just get curious. Why not? I suppose there we go.
Brilliant. Thank you guys so much. I've been talking to Kate Bailey and Mandy Manners. They are the authors of Love Yourself Sober, a self-care guide to alcohol-free living for busy mothers. It's published by Trigger Publishing. It's $12.99 and it's available wherever books are sold. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Drew. Lovely to speak to you.